Welcome to another edition of American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Sharon Gilstrap.
Sharon Gilstrap and I bring you this show every week along with our friend Will Strickler right here on TV 38 in Orlando. So happy to have you with us this weekend, and we hope you've had a great holiday season so far. By the way, if you want to check out more about American Roundtable, you want to check out our Facebook page at AmericanRoundtable.com. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/USA Roundtable. That's facebook.com/USA Roundtable. A lot in store, including a very cool opportunity to interview an author here in studio. His name is R.J. Wolf. He has written a book called The Last Days of Drayton, a post-apocalyptic novel which can be used as a guide to prevent similar things from happening in our present-day world. So it's a cautionary tale that you'll be very interested in hearing more about. And Sharon is a friend of RJ's, and so thank you, Sharon, for bringing us RJ.
My pleasure.
Now, we're going to start with shoes. A disturbing story, but also funny and lighthearted at the same time. Sharon, take it away.
Well, Payless shoe store conducted a little research recently with some influencers, fashion influencers and bloggers. They set up a pop-up store in an old Armani store. And it was,
Let me ask you a
Yes.
question here, because I'm a little new at some of these terms, right?
Yes.
First off, what are influencers and what's a pop-up store?
okay, so influencers are folks who are on social media, and different types of brands use them to sell their products. So these are beautiful girls or men who've worked out a lot, and they sell their products, whether it's makeup, clothing, etc. Like the Kardashians are influencers. So a pop-up stores are very cool. They pop up all over the world, and they're little stores that take over a storefront for a short period of time and bring in their wares and have cool parties and bring in the cool people.
So this is not
Yeah.
a permanent storefront, it's like a temporary
It's
storefront.
temporary.
Okay.
It's temporary, which is the new thing. Millennials love pop-up. I do
Good.
too. I like them. So Payless did a pop-up called Palessi to make it sound Italian.
It
And
does?
it does. So let me ask you, Al, would you ever pay $640 for a pair of shoes?
Only if it came with 2 pairs of pants and a nice suit.
Nice. Okay, so you're frugal.
Yeah,
Well-
yeah, you could say that.
So influencers are very, shall we say,
Naive?
that's a good word. So what they did was they came in and Payless brought in their $19.99 shoes and sold them for $640 because they pretended they were Italian. And so at the end, they let all the influencers know they were buying Payless shoes, which they never would have been caught dead in before.
So it creates a little bit of buzz about Payless. It also shows
Yes.
that some of these influencers are maybe a bit too naive. So that's kind of an interesting story. At
Yes.
least they let it out and they didn't just keep the money. That
Well-
would have been kind of not so good publicity, I wouldn't think.
Well, I think what it shows to me is that you can be frugal and spend $19.99 and buy some beautiful shoes, undoubtedly nice shoes because they really enjoyed them, and pocket the other $620 to do something else.
I think the fashion is generally overpriced for what the quality that you're getting, and there's a lot of this have to have brands, but ultimately I think you can do very well with reasonable brands, and you can still look really good, like we do. This is American Roundtable. We have author R.J. Wolf coming up next, right here on TV 38. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry, here with author R.J. Wolf. He's written a book called The Last Days of Drayton. And R.J., welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What would you say, continuing along the line we were talking about, you were talking about water. We're seeing the commodification of water. Meanwhile, there's people who are totally very scarce water, scarce food. But we also talk about how innovation is helping to grow things in a more efficient manner. And well, why haven't? What's behind? What's the forces behind the book that are creating this doesn't sound very good.
So lack of water is the main catalyst for how the world gets the way it does in Drayton. The argument to say that that's never going to happen is desalination. but desalination has its limits and it's insufficient. For example, there's over 18,000 desalination plants in the world, mostly in the arid continents like Australia and Saudi Arabia, and they produce over 86 million barrels of water a day, which is enough to give 300 million people water for one day. But to give everyone enough water for the day is 23 days. So what happens to the people from the first ration they get on the first day to the other 22 days before they get their second ration?
Because you can only go a few days without water.
3 days.
Yeah.
3 days. It's calamitous. So it ends up that the powerful will seize control over water rights. It'll be more powerful than gold or oil because that's where the control will come from the population. It's already happening now. I mean, there's cases in the court system where states and countries are fighting over water rights. Just this year, 2 states in America settled a case on water rights. So that will be the catalyst. And then furthermore, along the lines of why it's more dark ages and more medieval adventures, because without water you can't produce mechanization or weapons or warfare or the gunpowder
Or anything.
or anything.
You need the water.
That's right.
Very
So
important.
over the years, 56 years out is where Drayden plays out. I've taken the story through to what the world looks like 56 years without a shortage of water.
So that's the main catalyst of the story, is the water shortage, which is actually happening today.
It's
So-
happening now, yeah.
So what happens after the water gets scarce? What happens? So I mean, I'm not saying give the whole book away, but what would you say the main kind of thrust of it is? It's going to be like obviously more clamping down on freedoms and then the technology taking hold and
There's going to be a mad rush of the powerful to control as much water as possible in order to maintain and preserve themselves and then be able to control the population for their own survival. Those who don't have access to resources, those who don't have access to the channels that the wealthy and powerful do are going to end up being thrown aside or being taken by bandit or beast.
wow. And so things are getting hairy, obviously.
They already are. The World Health Organization predicts that in about 7 years, 20% of the world is going to be without drinkable water.
In 7 years, 20% of the world, 1/5 of the world, is going to be without drinkable water.
It's actually 5%.
You said, did I say 20?
I made a mistake.
Oh, okay. 5% of the world is going to be, which is still a large number. 5% of the world is going to be without water,
Drinkable water.
So what do we have to do? Build more desalination plants, or I mean, what do you do in something like something like that?
Desalination plants are going to be
That's going to be
seized.
the big.
They're going to be seized by terrorists. They're going
Oh.
to be seized by those who want to control the population. So you can build them, but they're going to be taken over.
So there'll be a mass control over the water.
Yes.
So then people they have to be rationed because it'll be controlled by the powerful. Then. Wow,
Yes.
this is quite a story, and it's not far fetched. I'm seeing things playing out, like you said, with water, with large mega corporations like Nestle trying to control water sources. So this is not, again, far from the truth, but it's nice that you're bringing it out. I'd like to follow up with you in the next segment and talk to you about how things play out in the next series, because this is a series of books.
Yes.
And so we'll talk about that. This is American Roundtable. If you want to find out more about American Roundtable with me and Bill Strickler, and also our newest co-host, Sharon Gilstrap, you can check out facebook.com/USA Roundtable. That's facebook.com/USA Roundtable. More in a moment. Welcome back to the American Roundtable right here on TV 38. If you want to find out more about American Roundtable, we're here every weekend, every Sunday morning at 9, right here on TV 38. Go to facebook.com/USA Roundtable. That's facebook.com/USA Roundtable. American Roundtable, I'm happy to have R.J. Wolf continuing with us. R.J., how long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about 7 years to conceptualize everything, and then 1.5 years to write it from first letter to last punctuation.
So the writing that's normally what books take, right? About a year and a half, but you had to do a lot of research in order to get stuff right,
I did.
guessing.
And I wanted to make sure I got the scriptures and I wove the civilizations, different cultures together properly where they made sense and they aligned. So I'm really glad and proud that I was able to align almost all of the folklore and religious scriptures that we have.
What's your proudest moment in the book? Like, what part did you really like that you came up with that you think really went over well once you got done with it?
I think the way I develop my characters has gotten a lot of praise. The character development and how real they seem and how people want to see more of the characters themselves, whether it's a different story or just hear more about it in general, the characters in their lives.
What character's your favorite?
I love them all. There's a part of me in all my characters.
But like, which one do you think really like you really like? That's like the one that you really like or identify with. Would be.
I like Samuel Drayden, the main character, because he's relied upon and he's someone that people follow, but he's also flawed. And in his imperfection, he finds people follow him because they trust him, and they want to be on his side, and they recognize that being perfect is not as important as just keep after what your objective
Well,
is.
sure, and nobody's perfect after all. So let's take a look. We'll go back to that thread that we talked about in the last segment, which was water. Water being the key to how the powerful seize control of the populations of the planet, somewhat 7 billion people. So how does that work? What's the mechanism there?
So shortage of water is the catalyst for how the world gets the way it does in Drayden. And we're already seeing conflict over water rights now between countries and states. Recently, in this 2018, in this year, a case was settled between states over water rights. And the argument for saying, well, we're never going to run out of water is because we have desalination plants, they say. Well, desalination plants are imperfect, and they're inefficient, and they're insufficient. Right now we have over 18,000 desalination plants in the world. They produce over 86 million barrels of water a day, which is enough to give 300 million people water. But in a population of 7.5 billion people, not to include what we need to sustain water, plant life, and animal life, you're going to need 23 days to give everyone 1 day's ration of water. So what happens in the other 22 days between when they get the first ration and the second ration, not to mention the plant life they rely on and the animal life, the world's going to be calamitous, disaster. And the powerful and the wealthy are going to seize control over water rights. It'll be more valuable than gold or oil as years go by.
And so we're seeing what do you think that's driving this need for these people to take over and control? Does that play into the book? Because we always see this happening with the 1%, and they talked about it in the last election and all that. Where do you see it?
Self-preservation. Human history has a way of having people preserve themselves at the expense of others. So those who don't have access to the wealth or the power are going to be left on the wayside and fall victim and prey to bandit or beast because they don't have the protection of the powerful. And the powerful will give the protection to those who they feel align with their objectives. So it's a method of controlling the population right now instead of other ways that we do it these days.
And so you're seeing, and of course, the headlines of today are not. You're going along the lines of the headlines today. It's a very timely book. We have companies, large conglomerates like Nestle, who are buying water rights, buying other water companies, bottling stuff that was normally free, and then charging people for it. And is that the mechanism you see continuing?
Yes, and it reads like a medieval adventure because without water, access to water, you can't make weapons, you can't make mechanization, and you just can't further technology. So in that way, the future is like Dark Ages, but worse because in the Dark Ages, there are resources to rebuild, but in the future, we've used all the resources to preserve ourselves.
Let's talk about some of the scriptures and stuff that you used in your research, some of the stuff with the spiritual and all that. We'll do that right after this on American Roundtable on TV 38. This is American Roundtable on TV 38 in Orlando, Florida. I'm Al Sprime here with R.J. Wolf. He is the author of The Last Days of Drayden, a post-apocalyptic saga. Here it is. Pick it up on Amazon.com. Check it out. R.J. Wolf with an E at the end, like the wolf, but with an E. And it's the first in, you said in 7, right? 7 in the series. So once we get through The Last Days of Drayden, where do you take it from there? You said you got six more to go.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I left what the next book was going to be. I left it to my readers, and I asked them what they wanted to see, and the census came back that they wanted to see a prequel more than a sequel.
Like something from before, so pre-apocalyptic.
exactly how it got to the point where Drayden, this one, started.
Well, they probably want to see it so maybe they could do something about it, right? So like,
Maybe.
give us a game plan there, buddy. You know, I like that. How much were you influenced by the Dan Brown books? Because I love the Dan Brown books, and it sounds like you're taking some similar kind of material and weaving it into a storyline.
I love Dan Brown. I think his work is very intelligent, and I think it portends a lot of what could happen. And he also takes complex matters and breaks it down in a way that people can absorb and understand, which I wanted to emulate a little bit in my stories, and I think I did. It reads very smooth. It paces like Ernest Hemingway. He's one of my heroes. So the pace and the tempo reads like Ernest Hemingway. We have a lot of similarities, Mr. Hemingway and I.
Well, he uses like a simple language, and you know. But so this has a kind of a classic feel to it then,
Yes, it does.
and very readable.
It is 10th grade level.
And that's good because we want something that you're not going to get bogged down in, right? One thing I found about Dan Brown's books, and I can get bogged down in books where then I go watch TV or something. So it's good. It's good to have a book that's very readable. What do you want to get folks to get out of it? What after they read this book and then the others in the series, what do they want to take away from it?
Well, I really want the message of unity, acceptance, and tolerance to come through.
Unity,
Acceptance and tolerance.
acceptance, and tolerance.
I want it to come through because we're finding every excuse to be different. When that's dangerous, that leads to the fall of civilization. We've seen it happen before in different empires, whether it's
course we have.
Roman, Egyptian, whatever you want to call it.
Egyptian, Roman, the Greek, the Holy Roman Empire, all the empires.
We're
all
doing
of
the
them,
same thing
really.
now, yeah.
And we're not doing anything any different.
We're replicating what we did in the past.
We're just doing it faster because technology is moving faster. So things are going faster. Everything is going faster, including the declination of things. But you used a lot of, we want to talk about this, about a lot of the spiritual, the scriptural. In fact, the chapters are actually written as books, names books in the Bible, which I thought was kind of neat. You have chapter 1, which is Chronicles, chapter 2, which is Acts, and then Salvation and False Prophets and Lamentation and Judges. So that's quite interesting. When you were doing your research, what did you singularly find was the most interesting thing that you came up with as far as the connectivity?
It was amazing to me that no matter what part of the world I found the scripture for the civilization, ultimately the story was the same. The characters had different names, but the story was the same. What the characters did in the folklore and scripture and history and prophecy was reminiscent of what you would see in the Bible or the Torah, the Quran. And the way the Quran recognizes Christianity, and Christianity recognizes Judaism, and Judaism recognizes other religions that came before, Zoroastrianism and whatnot, it was amazing to me, and that inspired me to go deeper into the civilizations we don't hear a lot about, like the Mayans and the Aztecs and Sumerians, Babylonians, the Mesopotamians. And when I brought that out, when I dug deeper into the scriptures, how similar we were was the most inspiring aspect of the whole thing. And it made me just want to make this message complete and whole, so people can recognize that we may be different, but together there's still harmony.
Because we're humans and we're vibrating. We're just trying to do the best we can, right? You know, but regardless of our specific cultures, the message is there's a unity there versus a disunity. We're seeing a disharmony, disunity. And of course, you know, there's a theory on that. I want to get your take on that, where the powers that be, who you talk about in the book, who want to control, want people at each other's necks, strangling each other, so that it takes their eye off the ball that the world is being controlled by a smaller and smaller amount of people. Your thoughts?
The best way to control a population is to divide them into different subcategories where we all stand against each other. And it's so much harder to bring everyone out of that and bring them closer together. And that's why in Drayden there were 7 rebellions, if you will, to the overall tyrant, who's Darius. There were 7 rebellions, and because of the power he amassed in his rise, he crushed the first 6. it just illustrates how, and I go through and I show Drayden has so much difficulty, even though he has the right motives and people behind him and the passion, it's still going to be hard. It's harder to bring people together than to break us apart.
And so how do we bring people together? There's obviously some kind of a guide in the book maybe to try to do that? Or?
What happens is, as through his adventures and his travels in different battlefields, General Drayden picks up different aspects of Scripture, different ruins or broken down universities or destroyed temples. He pieces together these Scriptures and he says, this is happening now, and this is the way I can leverage this to react to what's happening now. And he follows the story in the Scriptures, and he finds a way through the past and what we have in common to overthrow.
So in other words,
tyrants.
take your history, learn from it, which we don't like to in this country. We always like to keep plowing forward and tearing down the old buildings and tearing down the old history and not thinking about it. We've always been a very dynamic country. That's why we're number one in a lot of ways, but that's also a detriment, in other words, is what you're saying. We need to look more at the history.
Mhm. And despite that, there's so many twists and turns that happen in it that you really don't know how it's going to turn out.
Well, that's the nice thing about reading this book, and of course we haven't given anything really away. You want to check it out. It's got a lot of lessons, a lot of stuff you can use for today. So if you have an interest in the human condition, and you have an interest, check out The Last Days of Drayden. Thank you for the book. Thank you for your time, R.J. Wolf. And how can people pick the book up? Let's get a little information about you out there.
Well, we're on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, some retail stores, or my website, but Amazon and Barnes & Noble always has them available.
And what's your website?
rjwolfpublications.myshopify.com.
R.J. Wolf Publications with an E at the end of the Wolf. Publications.myshopify.com.
Yes.
This is Al Spry. Thank you so much, R.J. We'll have another edition of the American Roundtable for you next week, right here on TV 38. Remember to keep it real and keep it tough.